We are back, a renamed show, Golenbock University. I'm Ralph Tyko. Peter Golenbock is the honored universityite, or something like that. How are you, Peter?
Fine.
Good. I thought we'd rename the show. You're the professor, and you are indeed a professor. Tell us about that, what college and
what University of South Florida on the St. Petersburg campus. And this semester I'm teaching a course called Baseball and American Culture.
Oh, wow.
I've got 22 fine students, and very much looking forward to the semester.
They should put it on the curriculum that they listen to you on the radio, because
it's tough enough on the curriculum to get them to read the assignments. So no, I'm not doing that.
Okay, well, I just thought we'd get 22 extra listeners.
Oh, okay.
They might listen rather than read more.
No, I want them to read more.
Passion in your voice would be worth it. We have guests tonight. Alan Blumkin, one of the three baseball Michiganers, is being pinch hit for by our designated pinch hitter on the station, Mr. Marc Weiss. Marc Weiss, how are you?
Good evening, everybody.
Good. And for the first time on the Golenbock show, and we're going to announce that you, Ian Kahanowitz, and Marc Weiss have combined forces and have your own podcast on this network. It's called Genesis, and we're announcing that here. And you and Peter go back a ways. Ian, tell us about Peter and how you knew him in the past.
Peter has been part of my groups and Facebook for a while now, probably about 2-3 years, and some of the postings I do, I'm glad Peter chimes in, and I've read Peter in the 1970s and 80s growing up because I'm a huge Yankees fan. I read his book on Metals. I read Rage a few years ago, what he wrote, and a couple of other books. And for me, sometimes he likes a picture or something I post, and then I send him the picture or whatever, and he can blow it up and do whatever he likes with it. So for me, it's been an honor just to talk to Peter, because I remember him as a kid.
Very sweet. I appreciate it.
Yeah. The words are sincere, and nobody doesn't react to you in that manner, Peter, except Len Dykstra.
He loves Peter, too. He just doesn't pay him.
That's it. Exactly right. Yes, he loves
no animosity from Nails.
He loves me to write his book. He just didn't want to pay me.
Right.
The ultimate ghostwriter.
What a gentleman. There's some things in life you just don't want to learn. And when, as a second party, imagine you going through it. You didn't want to learn it. I didn't want to learn about his human nature in that respect. That's horrible. And,
well, it's funny. When some people are up against it, when they're financially in real trouble, this is how they behave sometimes. Lenny.
Oh, I didn't think of it. That could have been.
Yeah, no. Lenny was in tremendous financial difficulty, and he was, I'm sure sitting one day thinking to himself, well, how can I make some money to, pay my rent and stay alive and so forth and so on. And he figured out, I guess, that the easiest way to do it was to take it from me. So that's what he did. Because we spent about 9-10 months together as a team. And I have to tell you, it was a hoot. I mean, sometimes you do these books for the experience, and this was really something, because he's a very, very intelligent man, and his stories are incredible. He's got, Donald Trump's balls. In fact, it was interesting because
they're orange.
They're orange because he's a huge fan, always had been a huge fan of Donald Trump, and I'd always sort of make fun of Lenny as a result of it, because I, like the rest of the world, thought Trump was a clown. I didn't think there was any chance in the world that this, reality TV star could possibly be the president of the United States. You got George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, and Donald Trump. It didn't make any sense at all.
No.
That sounds like one of those SAT questions.
Which doesn't fit.
But the funny thing is, we then came to find out that one of the ways Donald Trump was so wealthy is that he would make contracts with people to do work for him, and they would complete the work, and he would refuse to pay them. That's what he did to hundreds and hundreds of workmen who worked for Donald Trump. They would complete their job, and he would just not make the final payment. And the irony, of course, is that's exactly what Lenny Dykstra did to me. So it's not a unique situation. Some people just have a way of, con men. The thing about con men, which I've always found so interesting, is that what they say about them is that they fleece you. They take your money. And then when they're done taking your money, you turn around and you tell people, what terrific people they are. And Lenny was a hoot. I mean, he absolutely was a hoot.
I think you need to write a book about the 9 months you hung out with them.
No. The funny thing is, Lenny and Trump are, again, alike in certain instances. Steinbrenner, I throw George Steinbrenner in it, too, because all three of them are just raging narcissists. And what's interesting about all these guys is that more than anything else, really what they wanted to do is to be in the headlines. So, I mean, if you Google Lenny Dykstra, you'll find some of the most absolute scathing articles you could possibly imagine by people who used to work for him. In fact, when I started this book, he sent me about 5 of them. He sent them to me. Articles by people who called him every name in the book, who talked about what a despicable person he was. And these are the articles that Lenny sent to me.
I don't care as long as you spell my name right. I don't
spell my name right. I never believed that all publicity is good publicity. I never believed that at all, especially as a writer. To have somebody say, when my book 7 came out, I had these conservative writers. You'd have thought they wanted me dead because I had said that Mickey Mantle loved women. Oh, heaven! How could heroic Mickey Mantle possibly have loved women?
25 years after Jim Bouton spilled the beans.
Yeah. Well, of course, 7 is much, what they call salacious. Ooh, salacious, but. So not all publicity is
too, and it's a novel, for Christ's sake.
It was certainly that, but I don't know. It hit too close to home for some people. But all these years later, people who read it love it, and they all say it's the closest things to Mickey's life that you can read. But when it came out,
what do they call it? Historical fiction?
They didn't call it. I just said it was a novel. I wrote it after Mickey died, so I couldn't. Most of what was in it was true. The problem I had was that I didn't have the details. And Billy was dead, and Billy Martin was dead, and Mickey was dead. So you couldn't go back to these people and find out the details. So I had to make up the details.
And I guess Whitey wasn't talking.
Oh, well, Whitey really wasn't really involved with the things I was writing about.
Gotcha.
These are, Mickey and Billy together, the two of them together, were utterly hilarious. They were hilarious in the things that they did. They were like 2 14-year-olds. They just had so much fun.
Speaking of Billy, his son, Billy Jr., who Peter and I had on these airways, has joined Comfortably Zoned. He is going to co-host the A's show, A's Baseball, Past, Present, and Future, with yours truly, and we did a first episode that I'm going to post on the network later this evening. So Billy is a great. You will agree, Peter. Just one
He's
of the
a lovely,
sweetest.
lovely kid. And unfortunately, he really got the short end of the stick when Billy died. I mean, you talk about the short end of the stick. I've written 2 major biographies. One of them was about Billy. It is called Wild, High, and Tight.
I remember reading that.
And the reason I was able to do that so successfully is that Billy and we were friends, and his friends realized we were friends. And so when I went to do this book, people like Bill Reedy, there's a fellow who lived in Binghamton where Billy and his wife lived in their house for a little while, people like that. So I've got a very, very good picture of what Billy's life was like.
There's a journalist in Texas that he'd confide in, and Billy told me his name on the air the other day, and Galloway or something like that.
But yeah, something like that. Yes. He also wrote about the Cowboys, the Dallas Cowboys. No, I didn't know him. Randy Galloway. I know who he is.
Right. Yeah. Okay. He was very close with Billy in Dallas, and Billy tells a wonderful story about how when Steinbrenner hired him for like the 5th time, he had been so settled in and so happy, and Billy and Galloway Billy Jr. were both talking to him, and he told them both what he was going to do, and they both looked at him at the same time. You're going back to the Yankees? You're crazy.
Oh, yeah. Well, they told him that after 3 and 4 and 5 as well. But Billy only wanted one job. And the unfortunate thing is that he had to work for Steinbrenner, who he absolutely hated. I mean, don't let anybody kid you. Billy hated George Steinbrenner because George was like Trump, somebody who would humiliate you in public. And that's what he would do to Billy. He would humiliate him in public, and not always by firing him. You know, sometimes Steinbrenner would make him eat crow. When we wrote number 1 together, which was a fabulous book, Steinbrenner said to Billy, if you don't take 4 sections of that book out, I'm going to fire you. Thankfully, they had to go and do it through me, so I ended up making a few bucks. But Steinbrenner constantly was humiliating Billy Martin through the entire time that he was the manager. I have somewhere in my archives a piece of paper that Steinbrenner handed to Billy, the 25 things Billy needed to do to be a successful manager from Steinbrenner. Which is, you know, it's ridiculous.
To Billy Martin, right?
Yes, no, exactly right. Oh, Billy was just friggin' furious.
You can imagine just having to read the headline of that.
Oh, yeah. But I wanted to make a point, and the point was when Billy died, Billy was married to his third wife, Jill Martin. And from everything that I had learned, you know, Billy, the last 2-3 years of managing the Yankees, was making $800,000 a year. He was making a hell of a lot of money. When he died, Jill Martin reported that in Billy's bank account was $8.86. That's what Billy Jr. and his sister split. $8.86, and Jill Martin would not even let Billy Martin Jr. have Billy's golf clubs.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you can figure out where all that money went.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I know where it didn't go.
Yeah, right. Didn't go to Billy Jr. That's for sure.
Okay. Ian, first time you've been on with Peter. What would you like to know from Mr. Golenbock?
Well, Peter, I speak to Jenny Paul quite often, and I know that you did the foreword to her book, The Yankee Princess.
That's
and
right.
you read the book. She made. Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
No, I'm listening to you.
But I think Jenny paints a different picture of Martin, more compassionate, kind of person in his book. You get the feeling that Martin is a prisoner of his own demons, and he really doesn't. He really didn't like what was going on with Steinbrenner, and he had all these issues, including booze. But she describes a different type of Billy that we're all used to: kicking dirt, fights with Steinbrenner, boozing, womanizing. He was a flawed character, and sometimes I think by reading a book, you kind of get a sense that he didn't like that. Now, you spent time with Billy. Did you get that impression?
The entire time I was with Billy, he never drank. Not once. Not once. He figured out that his drinking had something to do with his getting fired, and he decided he didn't want that to happen again. Or at least I think that's what it was. So we would go to these various bars. We would sit and we would talk, and he would tell me about his life. And he would drink seltzer water and lime. And we just had a great old time. See, what the thing about Billy is that if you want to talk about his baseball career, that's one thing. Where he always felt that he knew more than his general managers. And of course, in the Yankee situation, he knew that he knew more than what Steinbrenner knew. And so he was always fighting, when he was a baseball manager. And if you write about his baseball career, what you end up writing about is his, fighting with people. And of course, the pressure of being a baseball manager is so great that what he would do, he and Art Fowler, after games, they would go to a bar and they would drink. And every once in a while he would drink too much and do something like punch out the marshmallow salesman.
In Reno?
Yeah.
For reading that.
Or Eddie Lee Whitson.
or Ed Whitson. That was a terrible situation. Whitson broke his ribs in his arm. Whitson was a karate fighter. But
way before that, there were Boswell.
But the thing is that Jenny was close to Billy. And she was a female, and Billy treated women, much differently than he treated the people he was fighting with.
Right.
It all depends who's doing the writing. It all depends who's doing the writing. So Jenny and Billy had a far different relationship than, say, Billy and Reggie Jackson, or Billy and George Steinbrenner, or Billy and the owner of the Texas Rangers, or Billy and the owner of the Minnesota Twins,
or the Detroit Tigers, or the Oakland A's.
Right. Yeah, the Tigers, where he almost punched out the traveling salesman, the traveling secretary, not salesman, the traveling secretary.
Right, an old guy too.
An old guy too, yeah.
Let me ask you this, Peter. I think Billy knew baseball a hell of a lot, more than at least is credited.
Nobody can tell me that Billy wasn't one of the greatest baseball managers that ever was.
But that's what I'm going to ask.
He learned his craft. He learned his craft from Casey Stengel.
He did.
Who, along with John McGraw, were two of the finest, managers who ever lived. Billy was.
And wasn't he kind of nicknamed Casey's boy?
Oh, he was Casey's boy. He and Nicky were both Casey's boys, sure. But Billy was a brilliant baseball manager. His players would tell me how he would be 2 innings ahead of the other manager he would be managed against, and he would pull stuff that would drive these other managers crazy, and Billy would laugh at them. He was a brilliant manager. There's no two ways about it.
But like most brilliant people, Billy didn't have staying power.
His Achilles heel, and it really was his Achilles heel, was that he only wanted to be the manager of the Yankees. In 1957, after the Copacabana incident, when Hank Bauer punched out some drunken guy who was there that night, George Weiss blamed Billy. And George Weiss always hated Billy anyway, but he couldn't get rid of him because he was the Casey's boy and Casey's second baseman. But as soon as Bobby Richardson made it clear that Richardson was going to be an all-star ball player himself at second base, Weiss didn't need Billy anymore. And Weiss got rid of him. He traded him to Kansas City. And ever since then, ever since that moment, Billy told me this, all he wanted to do was come back to the Yankees. Wow. And then finally he got the Yankee job and he got fired. And he got the Yankee job and he got fired. And he got the Yankee job and he got fired. You know, he went to Oakland where they played Billy ball. They loved him in Oakland. They absolutely adored him. He could have been he could have been the governor of the state of California, or at least the mayor of Oakland anyway.
Well, he was also a hometown boy there.
Yes, and then George called and said, you know, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have fired you. You know, if you can get yourself out of the Oakland contract, you can come back to the Yankees. So what does he do? He goes and he calls the owner of the Oakland A's a kike. And he goes into his office and you know, smashes all the pictures on his wall and punches the wall, puts holes in the wall, you know. It was just bizarre, and he got himself fired. Came back to the Yankees. Goofy.
I think the amazing thing about Billy Martin is you look at the teams that he took over the year before and then the year that he got them, and he made these teams overachieve. I think the negative was that he probably wore out his welcome very quickly, but he still got the most out of everything that he had. I mean, like even going back to his first job with Minnesota, that was like a fading team of veterans.
Go back to Denver. Go back to Denver. The nice thing about interviewing a bunch of these different guys, Greg Nettles was part of the Minnesota farm team in Denver when Billy took over the last place Denver team. And Nettles said that before Billy came, this team was terrible. They had no idea how to win. And he said the thing that Billy did is he taught these guys, including Nettles, of course, how to win. And Nettles said that it was miraculous. It was like playing on a different team because of the manager. Most managers don't do that. Most managers don't come in and teach their players how to win. And Billy was fantastic with young kids. He was fantastic with African Americans. He was fantastic with the Latino players. Many managers. Don't forget what we're talking about.
Lenny Randle loves Billy Martin.
Let's go back to what we're talking about.
So did Ricky Henderson love him too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. In the 60s and 70s, you had Alvin Dark, who was a racist. You had racist managers. I'll bet half the managers back then were racist managers. Billy grew up in a sort of lower class section of Berkeley. I went to Billy's mother was alive when we did this book together. And I went to Berkeley and I spent a few days with Billy and his mother, which was a total hoot. She told me how she once bashed him over the head with a frying pan, which was a riot. She was about 4'9", but I could just see her picking up this frying pan and beating up this poor kid over the head with a frying pan. But this was an area where he had black and he had Latino friends growing up. These were his buddies. And so when he came up as manager, he had no problems with African Americans. Though I have to tell you one thing. He had a habit of liking his pitchers to throw at batters and hit them. And for some reason, the batters always who he liked to hit were African American. He had some idea that somehow hitting the African American players would make them more leery than if they hit the white players. That was his one prejudice. So Bill Dennehy, who also at some point I did a book with, was telling me he was pitching for Detroit, and he was supposed to hit, one of the black players on the other team, and it's like two batters before the guy he was supposed to hit, one of the white batters came up, and he was wild, and he hit that guy. And all the teammates on his Detroit team were astounded that Billy had asked him to hit a white guy, not a black guy.
And he hadn't even asked him.
Right. No, he had asked him to hit two batters later, one of the black players.
Yeah, but he hadn't asked him to hit the white guy.
No, he had not asked him to hit him. No, right.
Now, Peter, I got a quick question for you about that. How did his players who were black respond to that type of thing, especially like Mike Norris, who was like his ace in Oakland?
This was in Detroit, so I don't know.
Okay.
I'll tell you
I'm figuring he still did it back even when he was in Oakland.
He probably did.
I don't think
he
had any problems with blacks, with Henderson or anybody in Oakland by that time.
Well, Ricky always said that his best years were under Billy.
Yeah, the black players who played for him loved him. Absolutely loved him. You know who else loved him? Rod Carew loved him. You know who else loved him the most? Zorro Versalles.
Oh, really? With
Versalles
that 1 year.
Billy made him into an all-star.
Right.
He thought these guys had to win. Nettles adored him. Nettles absolutely adored him.
I want to run a thought by you why Billy is the way he is. I think Billy got the most from playing under Casey Stengel than anybody ever got on the Yankees.
Absolutely.
Because Billy played under him when he was struggling, when Casey was struggling to get back to the majors with the Oakland Oaks.
Yes, he was the Oakland Oaks manager. Yes. And
I think he saw a different side in Casey that Casey. I mean, he was a failure twice as a manager. For him to get back and to manage the Yankees was like a miracle. I said, "Who is this clown in New York?" When they hired him.
Well, the people who knew Casey, and George Weiss was one of those people who knew Casey Stengel, knew that he had a brilliant baseball mind. Weiss knew that. In fact, they got rid of a pretty darn good manager, Bucky Harris. They fired Bucky Harris. Harris managed 2 years.
He won the World Series in his first year.
That's right. And in 48, he almost did. Cleveland just did beat him out. But when Weiss took over, it wouldn't have mattered what happened. Harris could have won 2 years in a row, and he was going to fire Harris and bring in Casey Stengel. Because he thought that Casey Stengel was brilliant baseball man.
Now, of course, Casey and Joe DiMaggio didn't get along.
Casey and Joe DiMaggio didn't get along because Casey knew that Joe DiMaggio was at the end of his career, that he no longer was the talent that his reputation was. And Casey, like Billy, his interest primarily was in winning. So he wasn't going to put somebody out there who wasn't going to give his team the absolute best chance to win. And every once in a while he would do something like in I think it was 51. He made Joe the first baseman for a few games. He wanted somebody else playing the outfield because Joe no longer had the speed to catch the balls in the outfield and his arm was failing. So he made Joe DiMaggio the first baseman.
Embarrassed Joe.
And he embarrassed him. This is not a position that DiMaggio had ever played, and he just wasn't comfortable there. And DiMaggio made a big stink about it. I mean, DiMaggio was a very prideful man, and with reason. I mean, DiMaggio was one of the greatest ball players who ever lived, and Casey treated him, like a bench guy. So there was reason for that. But the thing that I wanted to say about Casey was that Casey was as tough as nails. He was just. He wanted you to do things his way. Every spring training, he would have a rookie camp where he would bring his coaches, and for a couple of weeks, he would go over the way he wanted his players to play the game. He was very strict about that. You hit the cutoff man, you threw to the right base, you did all the little things right. You didn't forget to cover first base if you were the pitcher and somebody hit the ball to the right side. You covered first base. If you played the game the way Casey wanted you to play it, Casey loved you. If you were a screw-off, if you were, somebody who was just there to fill up a spot, Casey hated you.
He hated those bonus babies, Leija,
Frank Leija.
Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I think Carroll.
Well, he hated them. He hated them because baseball was really stupid. They didn't want teams doing what they do today. You know, paying some guy, you know, $10 million to sign. At the time, there were no free agents. When you signed, you were the chattel of the club for life. You belonged to that club, so there was no negotiating with the club. So if you were a college kid and you wanted to sign, they came up with this deal that all you could get was $4,000. No, I'm sorry, that's not true, because there were a couple of guys. This guy Pettit got $100,000. There were a couple got $100,000. If you got more than $4,000 as a signing bonus, you had to spend either 1 or 2 seasons with the big club. That was the deal.
I think it was one, and Sandy Koufax was one.
Sandy Koufax was one of those as well. Yeah, yep. Sandy signed for about $60,000. Right. So you had to.
That continued
and the problem
for a
was,
long time.
It
did. It curtailed careers. Guys,
it killed careers. It killed careers because the young kids, 20, 21, 22 years old, playing in the major leagues, they were not ready, and they were not allowed to go down to the minors to learn how to play the game.
Especially a guy like Koufax who hardly even played. He played more basketball.
That's right. Koufax, of course, had all the talent in the world, and eventually he figured it out. He figured it out finally when he went to Los Angeles. He finally figured out how to get people out. But when he was in Brooklyn,
but he probably hurt his arm in the process of trying to figure it out.
Well, no, I think that curveball he threw hurt his arm more than anything else. Plus, back then, you didn't have the Tommy John surgery that you have today. Koufax could have pitched another 10 years if he had pitched 10 years later, which was really the shame of it. You know, they had Carl Spooner. Carl Spooner was this fabulous pitcher who threw the ball 95 miles an hour his last year in Brooklyn. He was 2-0 with an ERA of about 0. Then he hurt his arm. You know, and that was it.
Yeah.
You hurt your arm, you're done. And that's the way it was back then.
Hey, today they have high school kids taking Tommy John surgery and coming out of it throwing faster because they tighten up the ligaments or whatever.
That's right.
Whatever they do, it's a different world. I wanted to ask you guys. I wasn't in on the Hall of Fame. I didn't want to ask you this, but you did a Hall of Fame show the other day. And it occurs to me, because Joe DiMaggio wasn't a first-round Hall of Famer in the eyes of the voters, that whatever one prognosticates...
Well, wait, time out. Are you sure about that?
Yeah, that's true.
He wasn't a unanimous.
He wasn't a first ballot.
Sure?
He
was not a first ballot
Hall of Fame.
No.
Is that right?
Mind-boggling.
It is absolutely mind-boggling.
It is.
No, it's
right.
It's ridiculous.
And that's why I say that
but there's a reason for that.
Historically, the Hall of Fame selectors have their heads up their ass, pure and simple. So in every way, O'Malley is in and Mr. Miller is out. Marvin Miller.
Well, yes, of course.
Bill Hodges
the Red Sox owner is in. The racist Red Sox owner is in.
Right.
Yawkey. You know, come on.
Bud Selig. I say nothing more than Bud Selig, okay, guys? He's in.
Well, look. So let's be fair about this. Every commissioner, except Happy Chandler, who allowed African Americans to play baseball, and as a result of having done that, is not in the Hall of Fame. I don't think he is he? Chandler?
I think he is.
Okay, so if
I thought all the commissioners are except for Fay Vincent.
Okay, all the commissioners are except for Fay Vincent, right?
So that tells you.
And Giamatti. Giamatti's not in either. Giamatti was the baseball commissioner for 5 months. You know, so you can't really expect Giamatti. And
they say that Rose caused the stress, the decision over the Rose case.
No, smoking pretty much did him in, not Rose.
Chain smoking for 40 years probably did it.
Yeah, I don't think that did it.
And diet probably had more to do with it. Okay,
guys.
He wrote a book.
Chandler got in 82.
Oh, good. I'm happy to hear that. But it took him until 82 to get in. Which is amazingly enough. He let Jackie Robinson in 1947.
Which is a good point because the rest of them got in pretty much after they retired. I mean, Bud Selig's out, a year or two?
So let's go to Selig. Selig, if you read The Game, this fabulous book, The Game, Johnny's book about Selig and about Steinbrenner and so forth and so on, you begin to see that Selig, in terms of making money for the owners, did an absolutely spectacular job. He really did. He was very, very good for the financial health of the game of baseball. And so if you look at that alone, you probably will say to yourself, given that every single other commissioner, including Kennesaw Mountain Landis, got in, that he should have gotten in. But here's what's happening now that he's gotten in. Under his commissionership, we saw that lockout in 1994 where half the baseball fans vowed they would never come and watch another baseball game. And then in 1998, you had the home run race between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. And so 90% of those people who vowed they would never go to another baseball game all came back. And then, you had the greatest hitter of all time, Barry Bonds, in San Francisco, hitting all those home runs, and probably 15 other guys who were just absolutely amazing. Jose Canseco, just incredible, incredible hitters. Bringing thousands and thousands and thousands of fans into these ballparks. Now, did Bud Selig know that they were using, amphetamines or these enhancing drugs? Of course he did. Did the owners know that they were using these things? Of course they did. Did
Hall of Famer Tony La Russa know?
Did La Russa know that McGwire was using McGwire had that horse medication sitting right in his locker for
in his locker.
You mean the Anvil bottle?
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it was legal at that time.
Of course it was. It was legal.
That's the hypocritical part of it.
No, I know.
Laws weren't
right.
in place. And,
no, what happened? Let me tell you a story. Lenny Dykstra, in the first year he was with the Philadelphia Phillies, by August or September, he was a little guy, and the bat was so heavy he could barely lift it. And for the last 2 months of the season, he hit 180. And he said to himself, not being a dummy, he said to himself, if I don't do something, I'm going to be out of baseball. At which point he was living in Mississippi. His wife was from Mississippi at the time. And he went to this doctor, and he said to the doctor, this is the problem I have. I'm a little guy. I need to be stronger. What should I do? And the doctor gave him this prescription for Durabolin. And Lenny used it the way the doctor told him to use it. And when he reported to spring training with the Phillies the next year, he was a moose. He was, they couldn't believe
muscle.
They couldn't believe what the guy looked like. He was this muscle guy. And he had a fabulous, fabulous year. Now, Barry Bonds, at that point, had played a whole bunch of seasons. And clearly, he had won MVPs. He was a star. There's no two ways about it. Barry, being the smart guy that he was, saw what Lenny did. He went to Lenny and he said, hey, Lenny, what the hell are you doing? And Lenny, of course, told him what he told everybody else. Oh, I'm taking health pills. I'm working out. And finally, Bonds
hitting the GNC.
Yeah. Finally, Barry said to him, would you cut the crap? Will you please, So Lenny said, okay, I'll tell you. And he gave him the secret of what happened. And that's when Barry, using that same formula, started doing the exact same thing. It was Lenny who brought Barry Bonds into the steroids era, so to speak.
And
he took off.
Really.
What these guys were able to do at age 38, 39, 40, 41. If you remember, Mickey Mantle had to retire at age 35, 36. He couldn't do it anymore. He just didn't have it. Now, maybe if Mickey had been able to take some steroids, and build himself up, maybe he could have played a couple more years and done a lot better. We'll never know.
We will never know because in the 50s, the Russian track, the women in Russia were taking steroids.
That was in the 80s. That's another story. I was privy to all of that. I was going to do a book with the United States track coach in the 1980s, and I don't remember whether it was 84 or 88. And he had gone to East Germany and saw what they were taking and came back to the United States and started giving it to all of their superstar American track stars. Half of whom ended up eventually getting caught and thrown out of track. You know, Kersey Joyner, some of the, you know, those really famous people who ended up getting thrown out. But when you see that everybody else is doing something like that, and if you want to win, what do you say to yourself? Well, cripes, I'd better do it too. And that's what happened, and that's what happened in baseball, quite frankly. So getting back to Bud Selig and the fact that he's in the Hall of Fame, on Facebook now, I'm friends with a lot of people who are voting, baseball writers who are voting, and I see their ballots. They show their ballots. And almost all of them that I saw have Barry Bonds. They have Roger Clemens. They have, you know, a number of these guys. And eventually they're all going to get into the Hall of Fame because you can't have a Hall of Fame without them. It makes no sense.
And you can't, no question, and they make big bucks from, you know, imagine Barry Bonds, how much money he'd bring into the Hall of Fame on induction. Clemens, these guys, it just filled the place up. And it's a business. It's not something.
Yeah, but that's not why they're doing it. If that was the case, they'd have brought them in on the first ballot.
Well, I think they have to do it, right? Don't they have to do it if you put in Tony La Russa, who how many of his wins and championships come from guys who are on steroids, helped him win those games? And then you put in Bud Selig. How do you keep the players out?
Well, you're making a very logical argument, and this is why you're seeing on a lot of these ballots. You're seeing Barry Bonds. You're seeing Roger Clemens. How many home runs did Barry Bonds hit?
762.
762, right. 762. How many wins did Roger Clemens have? He had 7 Cy Young Awards. You're going to keep this guy out of the Hall of Fame for what?
Right.
I mean,
speaking of Facebook, I read a very interesting stat on Facebook on a meme. Do you know how many times Nolan Ryan won a Cy Young Award?
0.
Zippo.
He only had 1 second-place finish.
That just shocked me.
But he's a Hall of Fame pitcher. I don't care. Andy Pettit's a Hall of Fame pitcher. Clemens. He only won. You know, come on.
No,
you watch these guys. You know who the Hall of Fame pitchers are. When Nolan Ryan was pitching and you went to the ball game, all your eyes were on Nolan Ryan because the guy was spectacular.
I'm not saying you should be.
I call it the eyesight test. If your eyes tell you it, that's exactly it.
That's it. That's exactly it. You know who belongs in the Hall of Fame. You've seen them play.
Yeah. Ian, final question of Mr. Golenbock. You're the man tonight.
All right, Peter. This is what I want to ask you. Well, even though the game has changed since the time of Casey and Billy, you know, managing and going through steroids era and the way that the game's played today, could present-day managers learn from Casey and Billy and employ their tactics in 2017?
I'm sure they do. I'm sure the good ones do. See, what you have to understand, what Casey said. Casey said the great managers are the managers who don't lose ball games. Billy never lost a ball game. I mean, I watched the Tampa Bay Rays here. I live in St. Petersburg, Florida. I can't tell you how many games that Kevin Cash last year lost by doing unbelievably, incredibly questionable moves, mostly in terms of how he fooled around with his pitching staff. You know, he overused certain guys until their arms were shot, and then he would have to bring in terrible pitchers who ended up losing the games. Billy never did that. Casey never did that. You know, there's only one way to play the game, as Casey would say, and that's playing it the right way. Now, part of the problem right now is you've got ball players making $10 million a year, and if they don't feel like hustling, they don't. And there's nothing the manager can do about it.
Hey, and if they're not going to hit a ground ball to second base on purpose to get a guy over to third.
No, they're not. No, they're not. That's true.
And that, takes away from the game. It's.
But I can tell you something. I can tell you something right now. There are teams, there are managers where they do. I guarantee you, Pedroia on the Red Sox will hit the ball to second base to move the runner over.
I agree.
There are individual.
You watch the players. You know who will do it. You know who will do it. The great ones will do it. The game hasn't changed. The only thing that's really changed, it drives me crazy. Robin Roberts was a friend of mine. He lived here in St. Petersburg. Robin Roberts, he said one game he pitched, he threw 250 pitches in the game. I think he pitched, like an 18-inning game, something like that. 250 pitches in the game. And Don Zimmer, who also lived here, it used to drive Zimmer crazy. The pitcher would throw 100 pitches and the manager would come out and take him out because somebody had the cockamamie statistics that as soon as he throws 100 pitches, that his ability to get batters out is lessened. For a lot of last year, Kevin Cash had the idea, and I'm sure it was given to him by management. This was not, he signed because he agreed to do what they wanted him to do. But the deal was that you don't want to go through the lineup of the other team a third time. You go through it twice, and then when you're facing the batters the third time, they seem to have a better batting average than the first two times. And so this was the theory. There were other theories
who
too.
You're bringing in, doesn't it?
Yeah, that was one theory. Well, of course, they never brought in a reliever who was as good as the starter. I mean, that was part of the problem. If you've got, four guys who were like Mariano Rivera, yeah, well, okay, that might work for you. But if you don't, you're going to lose. And the other cockamamie thing that they've done in the last, 10 years is to take as many pitches as you can so that the starting pitcher will get past his 100 pitches in as few innings as possible. That's the other theory. The problem with that, it's like watching grass grow. You sit in the stands and you're watching these batters take pitch after pitch after pitch, and it takes an hour to play an inning, and it just drives you crazy.
Yeah, you couple that with the batter stepping out of the box and fixing his batting gloves every time.
Well,
I mean,
on one of my shows recently, one of the shows on the network, we had John DeQuisto, and John is one of those guys who's works for MLB and is kind of a go-between the umpires on the calls and speeding up the game. He says there are several things they're doing this year. They're going to pay attention to the 30-second rule a lot more, and
that should be a 20-second rule. Get the ball and pitch.
Right.
You get the ball and 30-second pitch.
Yeah,
Get
and
the
they've
damn
had
ball
the rule
and pitch.
for a couple of years. Go ahead.
You go.
I was just going to say, it's all a matter how much they choose to enforce it. The rule is there, but it's baseball policy to enforce it a certain way. He says you could look for speed-ups. I think the natural progression of technology will make it easier for the umps back in New York in the studio, as they say, to get it right. And I don't see if it's not obviously wrong, it should be held up. And that, boom, we don't see anything obvious. How long should it take? If you don't see it the first time, it's not obviously overturned. It should be a lot simpler. It interferes with the flow of the game. The announcers have a hell of a time with it. Sometimes I'm listening, I could swear their name. Well, it's the AMCO delay of the game moment or something.
Well, that's true.
They'll choose to get another commercial in there on one level or another. Hey, all we have is a commercial. Tally makes soap. That's the only thing we have on the Comfortably Zoned radio network. And if I don't say the right thing, Tally gets on me because I have to please the sponsor. So one of the things about not saying the right thing is ending this thing at a decent time. So
this is the time to do it. This is a decent time.
And it is time to do it. I want to thank you, Ian and Mark. Good luck on your new endeavor on the show. on the network. It's called Genesis. Ian Kahanowitz, Marc Weiss, thank you for being here.
Phil Collins is going to be there.
Pardon?
Is Phil Collins going to be there?
All right.
Yeah. How about Peter Gabriel?
Or Peter Gabriel. Good idea.
Yeah.
Fine idea. All right.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We renamed the show. It is Golenbock University. And you notice, Peter, I'm pronouncing it Golenbock after all these months. No longer Golenback. So you say hello to Wendy for me. Two Wendy's. Wendy, your sister, and Wendy, your wife.
That's right.
All
and
right.
You know, my cousin Jeffrey is married to a Wendy as well.
Oh, okay. That's what would they call that? A trifecta.
That is.
Wendy's.
It certainly is.
Hey, Ian, I guess we're the first graduates of Golenbock University.
You both get A's.
You know.
You both get A's. Yes.
It's an honor, you know.
I'm going to have to be a super senior. I'm coming back next week, and that's one of the pleasures of my life. See you next week, gentlemen. Or Peter, you guys are going to be doing another show this week, and I'm delighted to have you both on. And thanks for being here tonight. Everybody else out there, I want you to keep on keeping on, and please come back next week. It's Golenbock University, the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Adios, amigos and amigas. See you guys.
Take care.